I never asked for anything beyond peace. But when Alexandros Dimitriou decided that I deserved the entire world, I discovered that some gifts cost more than our souls. I'm telling you this story now, 3 years later, from a place of safety and genuine love, because I need you to understand how someone can give you everything you never wanted and call it love. But more importantly, I need you to know that even the most beautiful prisons have keys, and sometimes the only person who can use them is you. My name is Serafina Valdez, but everyone calls me Sarah. I'm 27 years old now, and I live in a cozy apartment in Portland, Oregon, where I work as a pediatric nurse and wake up every morning grateful for the ordinary. Freedom to choose what I'll have for breakfast. But 3 years ago, I was 24 and living in a tiny coastal town called Mendocino, California, where the morning fog rolls in like clockwork and the scent of eucalyptus mixes with salt air. Have you ever lived in a place so small that everyone knows your coffee order? That was my world then. Simple, predictable, beautiful in its own quiet way. I worked as a waitress at Sunrise Corner, this little cafe on Main Street where the locals gathered every morning to discuss everything from the weather to Mrs. Henderson's new haircut. I shared a small apartment above the old bakery with my mother, Esperanza. Mama has diabetes, and between her medical bills and my nursing school tuition, we counted every penny. But we were happy, you know. We had each other. We had our little routines, our small traditions. If you've ever lived paycheck to paycheck, you'll understand what I mean when I say that stability was everything to me. I didn't dream of mansions or private jets. I dreamed of paying rent on time, of not having to choose between buying groceries and buying Mama's insulin. I dreamed of graduating nursing school without drowning in debt. Simple dreams, right? But sometimes the universe has different plans for us. It was a Thursday in October when everything changed. I remember because Thursdays were always slow at the cafe, and I was hoping to catch up on some studying between customers. The weather had been awful all week, with this massive storm system moving down the coast. The kind of storm that makes the ocean angry and sends waves crashing against the cliffs like nature's throwing a tantrum. I was wiping down tables around 3 in the afternoon when the door chime rang. I looked up, expecting to see one of our regulars seeking shelter from the storm, but instead I saw him, Alexandros Dimitriou, though I didn't know his name yet. All I knew was that he was completely soaked, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and he was wearing what looked like a very expensive suit that was now completely ruined by the rain. Despite being drenched and obviously caught off guard by the storm, he was smiling. Not a polite, customer service smile, but this genuine, almost boyish grin. Like getting caught in a downpour was the most delightful thing that had happened to him all day. "Looks like Mother Nature had other plans for me today," he said, and his voice had this warm, slightly accented quality. "I don't suppose you have somewhere I could dry off and maybe get some coffee that tastes like it was made by someone who actually cares?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Well, you're in luck," I told him, grabbing a clean towel from behind the counter. "Carmen, our owner, would take it as a personal insult if anyone left here without having the best coffee on the coast." He took the towel gratefully and attempted to dry his hair, which only made it stick up in different directions. Somehow, this made him look more approachable, more human. "I'm Alex," he said, extending his hand. "Sierra," I replied, shaking it. His hand was warm despite the cold rain, and there was something about his handshake that felt genuine. For the next hour we talked. Not small talk, not the polite conversation you have with customers, but real conversation. He told me about growing up between Greece and New York, about feeling caught between two worlds. I told him about nursing school, about wanting to work in pediatrics because kids deserve to feel safe when they're scared. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel like my dreams mattered. When he finally did leave, he insisted on paying with $100 bill for coffee that cost $3.50. "Keep the change," he said when I tried to make change. "I can't accept this," I protested. "It's almost $100 tip for coffee." "Then consider it payment for the best conversation I've had in months," he said, already heading toward the door. "Besides, good coffee is priceless, remember?" The next day, I arrived at work to find a delivery truck outside the cafe. The driver was unloading an enormous arrangement of flowers. Not roses or lilies, but birds of paradise and exotic orchids I'd never seen before. "Serafina Valdez?" the driver asked. "That's me," I said, completely bewildered. The card read, "Thank you for reminding me that some of the best conversations happen during storms. I hope these brighten your day the way you brightened mine. ALEXPS. I'll be back for more coffee soon." Carmen appeared beside me, eyeing the flowers with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Sarah, honey, these are easily $300 worth of flowers, maybe more." That should have been my first warning. But in that moment, surrounded by the most beautiful flowers I'd ever seen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Special, seen. Like maybe I was worth grand gestures after all. Alex returned to the cafe over the following days, and our conversations grew longer, deeper. What struck me most was how he listened. Really listened. When I mentioned that Mama was worried about her next doctor's appointment, he didn't just express sympathy. He asked questions, seemed genuinely concerned. "You're remarkable, you know that," he said one afternoon as I was refilling his coffee. "I'm really not," I laughed. "I'm just a waitress trying to get through nursing school." "No," he said seriously, catching my hand as I set down the coffee pot. "You're a daughter who puts her mother's health before her own comfort. You're a student working toward a career that's all about helping others. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, should have been a warning, but instead, it felt like validation. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked suddenly. "Not here, not casual coffee. A real dinner, somewhere special." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to say yes, but because I'd never been asked out by someone like Alex. "I'm not sure we're from the same world," I said honestly. "Maybe that's exactly what we both need," he said. "Maybe we're both tired of our own worlds." That Saturday evening, he picked me up in a car that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years, but he'd chosen well for our date. Instead of some intimidating fine dining restaurant, he took me to a small Italian place about an hour up the coast. Over dinner, our conversation flowed as easily as it had in the cafe, but with an added layer of intimacy. "I realize this might seem fast," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "The flowers, this dinner, all of it. I'm not usually like this." "Like what?" "Impulsive. When I want something, I usually have a plan, a strategy. But with you, from the moment I walked into that cafe, all my plans went out the window." After dinner, he drove me along the coast road, taking the long way back to Mendocino. When we finally arrived back at my apartment, he walked me to the door like a perfect gentleman. "Sarah, I want to be honest with you about something," he said. Before I could go inside, my heart skipped. Here it comes, I thought. The catch. I'm not just passing through Mendocino. I mean, I was originally, but I've extended my stay. I'm staying at the Mendocino Hotel for the rest of the month. Because of me, I asked, hardly daring to believe it. Because of you, he confirmed. Because I can't imagine leaving without getting to know you better. He kissed me then, gentle and tentative, like he was asking permission with his lips. It was perfect in its restraint, romantic in its gentleness. Over the following weeks, Alex became a fixture in my life. He came to the cafe almost every day, always ordering coffee, but really just wanting to talk to me. On my days off, we explored the coast together. But it was the small gestures that really won me over. The way he remembered that I took my coffee, with just a splash of cream. How he always asked about Mama's health and seemed genuinely concerned. And the gifts, God, the gifts. Not just flowers, though those continued to arrive regularly. He brought me a beautiful leather journal when I mentioned wanting to keep track of my nursing school notes. When I mentioned that my car was making a strange noise, he insisted on having his mechanic look at it. Alex, this is too much, I protested, after he paid for what turned out to be a $1,500 repair. I can't let you do this. Why not? He asked genuinely. I have the means to help, and you need the help. What's wrong with that? It made sense when he put it like that. And honestly, the financial relief was incredible. For the first time in months, I wasn't constantly calculating how to stretch our money until the next paycheck. But Carmen was getting worried. Mia, she said one afternoon while we were closing up, what do you really know about this Alex? What do you mean? I mean, where does he work? How does he have so much money? What's his last name? Sarah. This man has spent more money on you in 3 weeks than most people see in 6 months. I realized with a start that I didn't have good answers to any of those questions. He's from New York originally, but his family is Greek. He works in shipping. That's love bombing, Mia. That's what people do when they want to make you dependent on them quickly. I felt defensive on Alex's behalf. It's not like that, Carmen. He's not trying to buy me. He just cares about me. But that night, as I lay in bed thinking about Carmen's warnings, I realized she was right about one thing. I didn't know very much about Alex's life outside of our time together. As if sensing my new scrutiny, Alex began revealing more about himself voluntarily. I need to tell you something, he said the next evening as we walked along the beach. About my family, about what I do for work. My heart rate picked up. My full name is Alexandros Dimitriou, he began. My father owns a shipping company. Not just any shipping company, but one of the largest maritime transport companies in the world. I stopped walking. How large? Large enough that I've been groomed since childhood to take over someday. Large enough that I can't go anywhere without someone recognizing the name. Large enough that, he paused, looking uncomfortable. Large enough that most people who get close to me are interested in what I can do for them, not who I am. Alex, exactly how wealthy are we talking about? Wealthy enough that money isn't something I think about anymore. Wealthy enough that I could buy this entire town if I wanted to. I felt dizzy. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because of how you're looking at me right now, he said sadly. Because I knew that once you knew, everything would change. I'm not running away, I said quietly. I'm just ... processing. Are you okay with this? He asked, was I okay with it? I honestly didn't know. I need time to think, I said finally. The next day, I found Alex at our usual table in the cafe, looking nervous and slightly lost. I've been thinking, I said, sitting down across from him, and I realized that I don't care how much money you have. I care about who you are when we're talking. The smile that spread across his face was worth every moment of uncertainty I felt, really. But I do have some conditions. No more expensive gifts without asking me first. And I want to meet your family. His expression shifted slightly at the mention of his family. Sira, my family is ... complicated. They're going to have opinions about you, about us. And not all of those opinions are going to be kind. Because I'm not from their world, I said. Carefully, because they've never had to consider that I might fall in love with someone who doesn't fit their plans. Fall in love. He'd said it so casually, like it was already an established fact. Alex ... I know it's soon, he said quickly. But Sira, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. And if my family can't accept that, then they'll have to learn to live with disappointment. I love you too, I said, and watched his face transform with joy. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I stepped off the safe, predictable path of my small-town life and onto something that felt like the edge of the world. Meeting the Dimitriou family turned out to be exactly as uncomfortable as I'd feared. The dinner was at an expensive restaurant in San Francisco, where his parents, Dimitri and Helena, assessed me with the precision of art dealers evaluating a questionable painting. They weren't cruel about it, nothing overt enough to call them out on. But by the time dessert arrived, I felt like I'd been dissected with surgical precision. Every conversation topic somehow circled back to money, to my background, to the differences between their world and mine. When Dimitri asked to speak with Alex privately, I stepped outside for air. Through the restaurant windows, I watched Alex's body language grow more and more tense as his father spoke. Saw Helena lean in to add her own comments. The drive back to Mendocino was silent for the first hour. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. What did they say to you? I asked. They think you're using me, he said finally. They think you're a gold digger. The words hit like a physical blow. And what did you tell them? I told them they were wrong. I told them that I love you, and if they can't accept that, they can learn to live without me in their lives. Alex, you can't cut off your family because of me. I can do whatever I want, he said, and there was something in his voice that was both protective and possessive. Sarah, they've never seen me happy before. The idea that someone could love me for who I am rather than what I can provide is literally incomprehensible to them. But it wasn't just noise, and over the following weeks, that became increasingly clear. Alex's relationship with his family grew more strained as he refused to back down about us. At the same time, he became more protective of me, more insistent on taking care of things I could handle myself. The breaking point came when I arrived at work one morning to find Carmen waiting for me with a strange expression on her face. Sarah, honey, we need to talk, she said. I got a call this morning from a lawyer representing something called Dimitriou Holdings. They want to buy the cafe. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? They made an offer for 3 times what this place is worth. Cash, quick closing, no contingencies. Carmen sat down heavily. Sarah, nobody offers 3 times market value unless they have a very specific reason. You think Alex is behind this? I think your boyfriend's family wants you out of his life, and they're willing to pay for it to happen. That night, I confronted Alex about the cafe. His reaction told me everything I needed to know. They did what? His face went through a series of expressions, from confusion to understanding to fury. Those manipulative bastards. So you didn't know? Of course I didn't. No, this is exactly the kind of thing they would do. They can't control me directly, so they're trying to control my environment. What do? We fight back, he said, and there was something in his voice that was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah, I've been thinking about this for weeks. About us, about our future, about how to make this work, despite my family's interference. And move in with me. I stared at him. What? Not here, not in the hotel. I've been looking at houses, real houses, where we could build a life together. He sat down next to me, taking my hands. I know it's fast, but my family is going too. Keep trying to manipulate our situation until they either succeed in breaking us up or realize that we're serious about each other. Alex, we've been together for 2 months. I know, but Sarah, I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I know that if we're going to make this work, we need to be a team. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. The idea of not having to worry about rent, about being able to focus on school without working full time, about waking up next to Alex every morning, was almost irresistible. I need time to think, I said. Of course, he said immediately. Take all the time you need. The next morning, I woke up to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a set of house keys and an address, along with a note, I know you. Need time to think, but I wanted you to see what I'm imagining for us. No pressure, just possibility. I love you. The house was perfect, absolutely perfect. Stone walls covered in climbing roses, a wraparound porch with views of the ocean, enough space for a garden. But it was also way too much, too expensive, too grand. Alex, this place is incredible, but it's also way too much, I said when he showed me around. Too much how? Too expensive, too grand, too not me. But it could be you, he said earnestly. Sarah, you deserve beautiful things. You've been living in that tiny apartment, working constantly just to survive. Why wouldn't you want something better? Because better comes with strings attached. Because if I live here, I'm completely dependent on you. You wouldn't be dependent on me. You'd be my partner. A partner who contributes nothing financially to our shared life. A partner who contributes everything that matters. Love, support, companionship, perspective. He moved closer to me. Sarah, I don't need your money. I need you. I said yes. God help me. I said yes to the house, to the life Alex was offering. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Alex handled everything, from hiring movers to transferring utilities to having the house stocked with everything we could possibly need. You're stressed enough with school and work, he said when I protested that I should be involved in these decisions. Let me handle the logistics. Mama had mixed feelings about the move. Mia, are you sure about this? She asked the night before I was supposed to move. We were sitting in her new apartment, a much nicer place that Alex had found and insisted on paying for. I'm sure, Mama. Alex loves me. He wants to build a life with me. But what kind of life, Sarah? One where you make decisions together, or one where he makes decisions and you live with them? Promise me something, she said, pulling me into a hug. Promise me that if you ever feel like you're losing yourself, you'll call me. I promise, I said, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. The house was even more beautiful when I arrived with my belongings than it had been during my first visit. Alex had arranged fresh flowers in every room, stocked the refrigerator with all my favorite foods. and even set up the study space exactly the way I'd mentioned I liked to. Work, the first few weeks were like an extended honeymoon. But gradually, I started to notice things that bothered me. Small things at first. So small, I told myself I was being ungrateful. Like how Alex always drove when we went anywhere together. When I mentioned that I could drive sometimes, he said my car wasn't reliable enough and he was more familiar with the routes anyway. Or how he started anticipating my needs in ways that felt more controlling than caring. When I mentioned wanting to call Carmen, I'd find that Alex had already called her for updates. When I said I was thinking about signing up for a study group, he'd already researched all the available options and made Alex, I can handle these things myself, I said after he'd arranged for grocery delivery without asking me. I know you can, he said, looking genuinely confused. I just thought you'd appreciate having one less thing to worry about. The isolation happened so gradually I almost didn't notice it. Alex suggested that instead of going to the cafe every morning like I used to, I should study at home where it was quieter. He had a point. My grades had improved. Then he pointed out that my evening shifts at the cafe were cutting into our time together, and since money wasn't an issue anymore, maybe I could reduce my hours. When Carmen called to ask if I wanted to come to her niece's birthday party, Alex reminded me that I had a big exam coming up and probably shouldn't spend a whole Saturday socializing. Each suggestion made sense individually, but collectively, they meant that I was spending less and less time with other people and more time in the beautiful house with Alex. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to lose touch with friends when your circumstances change dramatically? That's what happened with my old life in Mendocino. My co-workers at the cafe began to feel like acquaintances. Even Carmen and I talked less frequently. The first time I felt genuinely afraid was about 2 months after moving in with Alex. I'd been having trouble sleeping, so I decided to take a walk around the property to clear my head. It was around midnight, and the moon was full enough that I could see the path clearly. I'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I heard a car engine. A black sedan drove slowly past, and I could see there were 2 men inside. They weren't speeding like someone lost. They were driving like they were patrolling. When I got back to the house, Alex was awake and waiting for me in the kitchen. "Where were you?" he asked, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of controlled tension. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk at midnight. "Sierra, that's not safe. Anyone could be out there. It's private property, Alex. You don't understand," he said, moving closer to me. "This isn't Mendocino, where everyone knows everyone. There have been break-ins in the area recently." Break-ins. This was the first I'd heard of any crime. "I didn't want to worry you, but yes, which is why I've arranged for some additional security measures." "What kind of security measures?" "Just some cameras around the perimeter and a security service that does regular drive." The cameras appeared a few days later, installed by a professional company while I was at school. When I got home, Alex gave me a tour of the new system, showing me how it covered every entrance and exit, every window, every path around the property. "Isn't this a bit much?" I asked, looking at the monitor in his office that showed feeds from 12 different cameras. "Better safe than sorry," he said. "Besides, now we can see if any wildlife comes through the property." But the cameras also captured footage of me. Every time I went outside, every time I walked to the mailbox, every time I sat on the porch to study. I told myself it was just a side effect of the security system. But then I started to notice things. Like how Alex always seemed to know exactly when I'd gotten home from school, even when he was supposedly in important meetings. Or how he'd mention that he'd seen me talking to the mailman. "Alex, are you watching the camera feeds?" I asked one evening. "Not watching, exactly. But I get alerts on my phone when there's motion near the house. It's just a safety feature. Alerts about me moving around my own home." "Alerts about anyone moving around our home," he corrected gently. "Syrah, I can turn off the alerts if they bother you." "It's not that they bother me, exactly. It's just that I feel like I'm being watched all the time." "You're being protected," he said, pulling me close. "There's a difference." But was there? Because the end result was the same. I couldn't move around my own home without Alex knowing where I was and what I was doing. The breaking point came when I decided to drive into town one afternoon to surprise Carmen at the cafe. But when I got to where I'd left my car, it wasn't there. I called Alex, confused. "Hey, did you move my car?" "Oh, I forgot to mention. I had it towed to the shop this morning." The mechanic called and said there was some serious safety issues. "What kind of safety issues?" "It was running fine yesterday. Brake problems, something with the transmission." "Don't worry, I told them to fix whatever needs fixing." "Alex, I needed my car today. I was going to visit Carmen." "I can drive you," he offered immediately. "That's not the point. I wanted to go by myself." "Syrah, your car wasn't safe to drive. I couldn't let you risk having an accident, so you had it towed without asking me. Made a decision that prioritized your safety over your convenience." When I got my car back 3 days later, the mechanic's bill showed that they'd replaced brake pads that had been barely worn and fixed a transmission issue that sounded suspiciously minor. The total cost was over $3,000. I started testing things after that. I told Alex I wanted to join a study group that met in the evenings. He reminded me that driving back and forth in the dark wasn't safe, and offered to hire a tutor to come to the house instead. I mentioned wanting to take a weekend trip to visit my cousin in Sacramento. Alex pointed out that I had midterms coming up and probably shouldn't take time away from studying. I said I missed working at the cafe and wanted to pick up a few shifts. Alex worried that I was overcommitting myself and that my grades might suffer. Every desire I expressed for independence was met with what seemed like reasonable concerns, followed by alternative suggestions that kept me close to home. Alex never said no directly. He never forbade me from doing anything. He just made it clear that every choice I wanted to make was dangerous, or impractical, or potentially harmful, and the gifts kept coming. Beautiful clothes that appeared in my closet, jewelry that showed up on my dresser with romantic notes, a new laptop when mine was running slowly. "Alex, this is too much," I said, after finding a cashmere coat that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. "Nothing's too much for you," he said. "I love spoiling you. I love seeing you surrounded by beautiful things. But I feel like I can't possibly reciprocate. You," he said simply. "Just you, your presence, your love, your happiness. That's all I want." But there was something else bothering me. It wasn't just the speed of everything, or even the money. It was the way Alex talked about our future like it was something he was designing, rather than something we were building together. Have you ever felt like someone was writing your life story without asking what you wanted the plot to be? That's what loving Alex was starting to feel like. I tried to talk to him about it one evening after dinner. We were sitting by the fireplace, and he was reading while I pretended to study. "Alex, can we talk about something?" "Of course," he said. giving me his full attention. I've been feeling a bit confined lately, like I don't have much control over my own life. His expression shifted, became more guarded. What do you mean? I mean that every decision about my life gets filtered through your concerns about my safety, or your suggestions about what would be better for me. I feel like I can't make a move without your approval. That's not true, he said defensively. You make decisions all the time. Like what? Like what to study, what to eat, what to watch on television. Alex, those aren't real decisions. Those are just preferences within a life you've designed for me. I haven't designed anything. I've just provided options and support. Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you've created a very beautiful cage and convinced me that I chose to walk into it. The change in his expression was immediate and alarming. The warmth disappeared from his eyes, replaced by something cold and calculating. A cage, he repeated quietly. Sarah, I've given you everything. I've made your life easier in every possible way. I've eliminated every source of stress and worry from your daily existence, and you're calling it a cage. I'm calling it control, I said, my heart racing but determined to push through this conversation. You monitor my movements with cameras. You've isolated me from my friends and my work. You make decisions about my car, my schedule, my social activities without consulting me. You've made me financially dependent on you so completely that I couldn't leave even if I wanted to, undo you. His voice was dangerously quiet. Want to leave. The question hung between us like a blade, because the truth was, I didn't know. I loved Alex, or at least I loved the man I thought he was, but I was starting to fear the man he actually was. I want to feel like I have a choice, I said carefully. I want to feel like I'm here because I choose to be, not because you've made it impossible for me to be anywhere else. You do have a choice, he said, standing up and beginning to pace. You can leave any time you want. No one's forcing you to stay. Really, with what money, in what car, to what job? Alex, you've systematically eliminated every aspect of my independence. I've taken care of you, he said, and there was genuine hurt in his voice. I've loved you better than anyone has ever loved you. But what if I wanted to build it on my own? What if I wanted to struggle and fail and succeed based on my own choices? Then you're being foolish, he said bluntly. Sarah, you were barely surviving when I met you. You had no security, no safety net, no future beyond hoping you could graduate and find a job. But it was my life, I said, tears starting to fall. It was hard, but it was mine. And now you have a better life. Our life, your life, I corrected. A life you've planned and arranged and controlled, where I'm just a beautiful accessory. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken threats. Is that really what you think? He asked finally. That you're just an accessory to me? I think you love me, I said slowly. But I think you love me the way someone loves a work of art they own. You want to display me, protect me, keep me safe and beautiful and exactly where you can see me. And what's wrong with that? The question was asked with such genuine confusion that it terrified me, because I realized that Alex truly couldn't see the difference between loving someone and owning them that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Alex slept peacefully beside me. I thought about my conversation with Mama before I moved in, about her warning that I might lose myself in Alex's life. I thought about Carmen's concerns about love bombing and dependency, and I realized that I had to make a choice. I could accept the life Alex had created for me, the safe, comfortable, controlled existence where all my needs were met but none of my choices were my own. Or I could find a way to reclaim my independence, even if it meant losing the man I loved. But as I lay there planning my escape from paradise, I had no idea that Alex had already anticipated this moment. I had no idea that the beautiful cage I was living in had locks. I hadn't even discovered yet. The next few weeks were a careful dance of pretense. I continued to live in the house, continued to smile and act grateful for Alex's care, but inside, I was planning. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before, like how the security cameras were positioned to monitor all the exits, like how Alex always seemed to know when I was planning to go somewhere, even when I hadn't told him, like how my phone had started behaving strangely, running slowly and dying quickly. The first breakthrough came when I was using Alex's laptop to work on a school project, while mine was supposedly being repaired. I accidentally clicked on the wrong folder and found myself looking at files with names like S_movement_tracking and S_communication_monitor. When I opened one, I found detailed logs of my daily activities, complete with timestamps and locations. My blood ran cold as I realized the extent of Alex's surveillance. He wasn't just monitoring the house with cameras. He was tracking my movements, my phone calls, probably even my text messages. The man I'd fallen in love with had turned me into a subject of study, a butterfly pinned to a board. But the most chilling discovery was a folder labeled contingency plans. Inside were documents outlining various scenarios for what Alex called relationship management. Plans for what to do if I tried to leave, including detailed psychological profiles and strategies for redirecting negative behaviors. One document was titled Sierra's Support Network, Neutralization Strategies. It contained information about my friends and family that Alex couldn't possibly have known unless he'd been investigating them. Carmen's financial situation, including her mortgage and her aging mother's medical expenses, my cousin Maria's immigration status, even details about Father Miguel's past that could potentially be used against him. I realized with growing horror that Alex hadn't just been controlling me. He'd been preparing to control or eliminate anyone who might help me escape. I closed the laptop carefully, my hands shaking. I couldn't let Alex know what I'd discovered. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this, needed to find a way to get help, without triggering whatever contingency plans he had in place. That night at dinner, I forced myself to act normal, even as my mind raced with escape plans. "Sierra, you seem distracted tonight," Alex said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired," I said, managing a smile. "School's been intense lately. Maybe you should take a break," he suggested. "We could go away for a weekend, somewhere relaxing." The idea of being alone with Alex somewhere even more isolated than our current house filled me with terror. "That sounds lovely," I lied. "But I really can't miss any more classes right now." "Of course," he said, but I could see him filing away. My response for later analysis the next morning. While Alex was in his office on a conference call, I carefully used his computer again. This time, I copied some of the most damning files onto a flash drive I'd hidden in my textbook. If I was going to expose what Alex was doing, I needed evidence. I also discovered something else. Alex had been in contact with his family throughout our entire relationship, sending them regular reports on my behavior and progress. The emails revealed that the whole thing had been a coordinated effort from the beginning. His parents hadn't just disapproved of me. They'd been actively working with Alex to either rehabilitate me into someone suitable for their family or to gather enough evidence to discredit me completely. One email from his mother made my blood boil. Alexandros, the girl is more resistant than anticipated. Perhaps it's time to consider more direct intervention. We've discussed the medical options. That would make her more ... compliant. Dr. Stavros is standing by. Medical options. They were planning to drug me, to alter my brain chemistry, to make me more compliant. I felt sick as I realized how close I'd come to becoming not just a prisoner, but a zombie in my own body. I had to get out, and I had to do it before they escalated to the next phase of their plan. The problem was that I had no money of my own, no car I could trust, and no way to communicate safely with potential allies. Alex monitored everything. But there was one thing he didn't know about. The old flip phone Carmen had given me months ago as a backup, which I'd hidden in my textbooks and never activated. That afternoon, while Alex was in town for a meeting, I activated the phone and made a call to the one person I hoped could help me. Carmen, it's Sarah. I need help, and I need you to listen carefully without asking questions. Mia, what's wrong? You sound terrified. I am terrified. Alex isn't who I thought he was. He's been monitoring everything I do, tracking my movements, planning to ... to hurt me if I try to leave. I have evidence, but I need to get out of here safely. There was a long pause. Where are you calling from? A phone he doesn't know about. Carmen, I need you to contact someone for me. My cousin Sophia in Sacramento. Tell her to call Father Miguel and ask him to help. I'm going to need somewhere safe to go, and I'm going to need help exposing what Alex has been doing. Consider it done. But Sarah, how are you going to get out of there? If he's monitoring everything ... I have a plan, I said, though that was an overstatement. But I need you to do something else. In 3 days, I want you to call the local police and report that you haven't heard from me and you're worried. Tell them about Alex, about the isolation, about how he's been controlling me. It needs to come from you, because if I disappear, they might just think I ran away. Sarah, this sounds incredibly dangerous. It is dangerous, but staying is more dangerous. Carmen, if something happens to me, if I disappear or if there's an accident, you need to know that it wasn't really an accident. Alex and his family, they're not just wealthy, they're dangerous. After I hung up, I carefully hid the phone again and began implementing my plan. I couldn't just run, not with Alex's resources and connections, but I could make him think I was broken, compliant, ready to accept whatever he had planned for me. And while he was relaxing his guard, I could gather more evidence and prepare for my real escape. The performance was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. For the next 2 days, I played the role of the grateful, dependent girlfriend who had finally accepted her place in Alex's world. I apologized for my recent mood swings and thanked him for his patience. I told him how much I appreciated everything he'd done for me and how I was ready to trust him completely with decisions about our future. Alex ate it up. I could see the relief and satisfaction in his eyes as he believed that his careful conditioning had finally worked. He became more affectionate, more relaxed, more willing to leave me alone for short periods. On the 3rd day, while Alex was in another meeting, I put my plan into action. First, I used his computer to send copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. 2, 3 different email accounts, Carmen's, Father Miguel's, and a secure account I'd set up using the library's public computer the week before. If something happened to me, at least someone would know the truth. Then I wrote a letter explaining everything that had happened, from the love bombing at the beginning to the surveillance and control that followed. I hid copies of this letter in 3 different places. One in my textbook where Carmen would eventually find it. One in the church where Father Miguel would discover it. And one in my car where the police would find it if they searched. Finally, I prepared for the most dangerous part of my plan. That evening, I told Alex that I wanted to cook dinner for him as a way of showing my appreciation for everything he'd done. He was delighted, seeing it as further evidence of my surrender to his control. While he was in his office finishing up work, I prepared the meal carefully. I also prepared something else, a mild sedative that I'd found in the medicine cabinet. Something prescribed for Alex's occasional insomnia. Not enough to hurt him, but enough to make him drowsy and less alert. "This is delicious," Alex said as we ate. "I had no idea you were such a good cook." "Mama taught me," I said, forcing a smile. "She always said that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach." "Your mother is a wise woman," he said, taking another bite. "I should thank her properly someday." As the evening progressed, I could see the sedative beginning to take effect. Alex's movements became slower, his speech slightly slurred. He attributed it to being tired from work and suggested we go to bed early. "You go ahead," I said. "I want to clean up the kitchen first." He nodded and headed upstairs, and I listened carefully until I heard the sound of his bedroom door closing. Then I waited another hour until I was sure he was deeply asleep, moving as quietly as possible. I gathered the few essential items I could carry, some clothes, my important documents, the flash drive with evidence, and what little cash I'd been able to save. I also took photos of the monitoring equipment in Alex's office, additional evidence of what he'd been doing. The hardest part was getting out of the house without triggering the security system. But I'd been paying attention during Alex's tours, and I knew there was a brief window during the system's nightly reset when the cameras went offline for maintenance at exactly 3:17 a.m. I slipped out through a basement window that wasn't covered by cameras, carrying my bag with me. I had about 4 minutes before the system came back online. I ran through the woods surrounding the property, staying off the roads where Alex's security patrols might spot me. It was terrifying, stumbling through the darkness with only the moonlight to guide me, but it was also liberating. For the first time in months, I was making my own choices about where to go and what to do. I had arranged to meet Father Miguel at a truck stop about 5 miles from the house. He was waiting for me in his old sedan, and I'd never been so happy to see anyone in my life. "Sierra, thank God," he said as I collapsed into the passenger seat. "Are you hurt?" "Not yet," I said, breathing hard from the run. "But we need to go. When Alex wakes up and finds me gone, he's going to come looking." Father Miguel drove through the night, taking back roads toward Sacramento, where my cousin Sophia was waiting with a lawyer and a safe place for me to stay. As we drove, I told him everything about the surveillance and the control and the plans Alex's family had been making. "Sierra, this isn't just emotional abuse," Father Miguel said when I finished. "This is kidnapping, stalking, conspiracy. These people belong in prison." "I know," I said, "but they're rich, and rich people don't always face consequences for their actions." "We'll see about that," he said grimly. The next few weeks were a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and media attention that I hadn't expected. The evidence I'd gathered was even more damning than I'd realized. Alex hadn't just been monitoring me. He'd been conducting what amounted to a psychological experiment, documenting his methods for controlling me with the intention of publishing. a paper on behavioral modification in intimate relationships. The discovery of his research files led to a broader investigation that uncovered a network of wealthy men who had been sharing techniques for controlling their partners. Alex and his father were arrested on charges including kidnapping, stalking, conspiracy, and violation of privacy laws. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when Alex's mother, Helena, was arrested for attempting to bribe a judge to dismiss the charges against her son. Turned out that all their money couldn't buy their way out of the consequences of their actions. The trial was difficult, but I had something I'd almost forgotten I possessed: my own voice. Standing in that courtroom, telling my story to a jury of ordinary people who understood that love isn't supposed to feel like imprisonment, I felt more powerful than I had in months. Alex tried to maintain his innocence, claiming that everything he'd done had been out of love, that he'd only wanted to protect me and provide for me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. The defendant's actions, the judge said during sentencing, represent a profound violation of the victim's autonomy and dignity. While the defendant may have convinced himself that his behavior was motivated by love, true love requires respect for the other person's freedom to make their own choices. The defendant's attempt to control every aspect of the victim's life, through surveillance, isolation, and financial manipulation, represents not love, but ownership. This court sentences the defendant to 8 years in prison with mandatory psychological counseling. I cried when the verdict was read, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of validation, of freedom finally secured. The hardest part of recovery wasn't the legal battles or the media attention. It was learning to trust my own judgment again. Learning to believe that I deserved love that didn't come with conditions or cameras or control. I moved to Portland and finished nursing school, working part-time in a children's hospital while I rebuilt my life from the ground up. It was scary at first, making decisions entirely on my own after months of having every choice filtered through Alex's preferences. But slowly, I remembered what it felt like to be myself. Carmen visited me often during those first few months, helping me furnish my small apartment and reminding me that real friends don't try to control your choices. They just support you in making them. "You know what I'm proudest of," she said one evening as we painted my bedroom walls. "Not that you escaped, though I'm glad you did. I'm proud that you trusted yourself enough to know that something was wrong, even when everyone around you was telling you how lucky you were." Have you ever had to rebuild your entire sense of self from scratch? It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I had to learn to sleep without wondering if someone was watching me. I had to learn to make plans without getting permission. I had to learn to trust that my feelings and instincts were valid, even when they contradicted what other people told me I should want. The process was helped by therapy, by support groups for survivors of domestic abuse, and by the incredible strength I found in other women who had been through similar experiences. Hearing their stories made me realize that what had happened to me wasn't unique, but it also wasn't my fault. But the real turning point in my healing came 2 years after the trial. When I met Dr. James Chen, I was working a shift in the pediatric ICU when a new attending physician started making rounds. Dr. Chen was quiet, thoughtful, and had a way of talking to the children that immediately put them at ease. What struck me most was how he interacted with the nursing staff, not as subordinates, but as colleagues whose opinions and expertise he genuinely valued. "Nurse Valdez," he said, after observing me work with a particularly difficult young patient, I've never seen anyone calm an anxious child that effectively. What's your secret? No secret, I said, surprised by his genuine interest. I just remember what it felt like to be scared and powerless, and I tried to give them back some sense of control. He nodded thoughtfully. That's wisdom, not just technique. We started having coffee together during breaks, talking about our patients, about medicine, about life. James had been through his own difficult experiences. A divorce from someone who had tried to control his career choices, and he understood the importance of independence in relationships. What I loved about James was that he never tried to rescue me or fix me. He didn't offer to pay my bills or solve my problems. Instead, he offered partnership, respect, and the kind of love that makes you feel more like yourself, not less. When he finally asked me out, 6 months after we'd started working together, he did it in the most perfectly James way possible. "Sarah," he said, "I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere you choose, at a time that works for your schedule, with no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company. What do you think?" I laughed, recognizing the careful way he'd phrased it to emphasize my choice and agency. "I think I'd like that very much." Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than grand gestures and overwhelming gifts. James helped me plan a garden for my apartment balcony because I mentioned missing the flowers from Mendocino. He brought me books by authors he thought I'd enjoy, but only after we'd talked about what kinds of stories interested me. Most importantly, he supported my dreams without trying to take them over. When I told him I wanted to eventually work in medical missions, helping children in underserved communities, he didn't try to talk me out of it or suggest safer alternatives. Instead, he asked questions about my plans and offered to help me research organizations that did that kind of work. "James," I said one evening as we were cooking dinner together in my kitchen, "can I ask you something?" "Always," he said, not looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "Why don't you ever try to make decisions for me? Even small ones. Most men I've known, even good ones, have opinions about what I should do or how I should handle things." He stopped chopping and looked at me seriously. "Because your life isn't my project to manage. My job as your partner isn't to improve you or direct you or keep you safe from your own choices. My job is to love you and support you and trust that you know what's best for yourself. And what if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them, the same way I learn from mine." Sarah, the woman I fell in love with, is strong and intelligent and capable of making her own decisions. Why would I want to change that? It was such a simple concept, but after my experience with Alex, it felt revolutionary. James loved me not despite my independence, but because of it. He didn't see my strength as something to overcome, but as something to celebrate. We'd been together for a year when I finally felt ready to take him to Mendocino, to show him where my story had begun. Carmen was thrilled to meet him, and I could see her relief when she observed how he interacted with me. "This one's different," she whispered to me while James was outside talking to Father Miguel about the church's community garden project. "How can you tell?" "Because he listens to you instead of planning what to say next. Because he asks your opinion about things instead of assuming he knows what you want. Because when you talk, he looks at you like you're the most interesting person in the room, not like you're a beautiful object he's lucky to own." That night, James and I walked along the same beach where Alex had first told me he loved me. But this time, instead of feeling overwhelmed by someone else's intensity, I felt peaceful, grounded in my own sense of self. Sarah James said as we sat on a piece of driftwood watching the waves. I have something I want to ask you. My heart skipped, but it wasn't the fearful flutter I'd felt with Alex. It was anticipation, excitement about what we might build together. He didn't get down on one knee or produce an elaborate ring. Instead, he took my hand and looked into my eyes with the same respectful attention he'd shown me from the beginning. I love you, he said simply. I love your strength, your compassion, your dreams, your independence. I love the life we've built together, and I'd like to build more of it. Will you marry me? I started crying, but they were tears of joy, of recognition, of coming home to myself. Yes, I said. But I have some conditions. He laughed, knowing I was half joking, but also knowing that my need for clearly defined boundaries was legitimate and important. I want to keep my name, I said. I want to continue my career, including the medical mission work. I want us to make major decisions together, not have one person decide for both of us. And I want to go to couples counseling, not because we have problems, but because I want to make sure we always know how to communicate honestly with each other. I love your conditions, he said, kissing me softly. And I have one of my own. What's that? I want you to be happy. Not grateful, not protected, not taken care of. Happy, whatever that looks like for you, in whatever form it takes. That's what I want for us. We got married the following spring in a small ceremony at the church in Mendocino, with Carmen as my maid of honor and Father Miguel officiating. Mama cried through the entire ceremony, telling everyone who would listen that she'd never seen me look so much like myself. The reception was everything my relationship with James was. Simple, joyful, focused on the people we loved rather than impressing anyone. Instead of expensive flowers, we had wildflowers from the coast. Instead of a fancy venue, we celebrated in the cafe where I'd first learned what real love could look like. You know what I love most about this? Carmen said, as we danced music from a small local band. What's that? No one here is pretending to be anything other than who they are. This feels like you, Mia, like the woman you were always meant to be. Now, 3 years later, James and I have built a life together that feels like partnership in every sense of the word. We both work at the children's hospital, though in different departments. We've bought a small house with a garden where I grow the vegetables James uses for his elaborate weekend cooking experiments. We're planning our first medical mission trip together to a clinic in Guatemala that serves indigenous children. Most importantly, I wake up every morning feeling like myself. Not like someone's project or possession, but like a woman who has agency over her own life and choices. James supports my dreams without trying to manage them. He loves me without trying to control me. He gives me gifts that reflect who I am, not who he wants me to become. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the time I spent with Alex, if I wish I'd never met him. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain, the fear, the months of feeling like I was disappearing into someone else's vision of my life. But I don't regret the lessons I learned about recognizing love bombing, about trusting my instincts, about the difference between someone who wants to take care of you and someone who wants to own you. I, also, don't regret the strength I discovered in myself when I finally decided to fight back. Leaving Alex wasn't just about escaping an abusive situation. It was about reclaiming my right to make my own mistakes, to struggle, to succeed or fail based on my own choices. If you're in a relationship where someone's generosity feels suffocating, where love feels like gratitude for someone else's management of your life, please listen to your instincts. Real love doesn't require you to become smaller or more dependent. Real love doesn't monitor your movements or isolate you from friends. Real love doesn't come with the implicit message that you should be grateful for someone else's control over your choices. You deserve love that makes you feel more like yourself, not less. You deserve a partner who trusts your judgment, who supports your independence, who sees your strength as something to celebrate rather than something to manage. And if you're reading this from a situation that feels impossible to escape, please know that it's not. There are people who will help you, organizations that understand what you're going through, legal systems that can protect you. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but you are stronger than you know. I'm living proof that fairy tales don't have to end with the princess grateful for her golden cage. Sometimes the best ending is when the princess realizes she was never meant to be saved. She was meant to save herself. If this story has touched you, if you've seen yourself in my experience, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories about women who found the strength to reclaim their lives, make sure you're following for more content about love, independence, and the courage to choose yourself. Remember, you are not a project to be improved, a possession to be protected, or a problem to be solved. You are a whole person worthy of love that celebrates who you are, not love that tries to change who you are. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away from anything that makes you feel like you owe someone your life in exchange for their love.